listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, the escalating war between Israel and Iran, with neither side backing down. Our Foreign Minister Penny Wong says the federal government is now organising repatriation flights for Australians trapped in the Middle East as the missile attacks from both Israel and Iran continue. Meantime, the US President Donald Trump has threatened on social media if Iran attacks the US in, quote, any way, shape or form, they will feel the full strength and might of the US armed forces. But then he added he's hopeful Israel and Iran could do a deal.
I think it's time for a deal and we'll see what happens, but sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
So will the US step in and follow through on its threat? Our chat is coming up about what could happen next. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Monday, the 16th of June. A police officer has been shot dead in Tasmania's northwest. It's understood the male police officer was at a rural property, with police confirming an offender has also been injured in the incident and there's no ongoing threat to the wider community. Meantime, an investigation's been launched after 3 men were shot outside a family restaurant in Sydney's southwest at lunchtime. A crime scene has been established after reports the gunman opened fire at around 1:15 in Auburn in the brazen daylight attack. The New South Wales Police Minister says, quote, we are deeply concerned by the horrifying events unfolding in Auburn this afternoon, adding this kind of violence has no place in our community. The man suspected of assassinating 2 US politicians over the weekend has now been arrested after a 2-day manhunt, with the local governor, Tim Walz, announcing the major breakthrough.
After a 2-day manhunt, 2 sleepless nights, law enforcement have apprehended Vance Bolter. That's 48 hours that law enforcement involved in a complex and dangerous manhunt.
Vance Bolter is accused of shooting dead Democratic State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband in Minneapolis in what authorities allege was a politically motivated attack. He also allegedly shot a second politician and his wife, who both survived. Authorities allege Bolter wore a latex mask and posed as a police officer before shooting the politicians at their homes. Police say they also recovered a so-called manifesto and a list of other potential targets. And a wave of anti-tourist protests have broken out across Europe. Locals in Barcelona have blasted water guns and set off smoke bombs in front of shop fronts and hotels, telling tourists to go home. Protesters say they feel their cities are turning into playgrounds for foreigners, while locals are left with a housing crisis, increasing rents and environmental consequences. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on the escalating war between Israel and Iran with the Professor of Middle Eastern Politics at Deakin University, Shahram Akbarzadeh. Professor, thanks so much for joining us. We understand the first strikes occurred Friday morning, our time, and it seems, although there's been pleas from a lot of bodies around the world, a lot of world leaders, the attacks from both sides have only escalated over the weekend and today.
That's right. It was a surprise attack by Israel that claimed that it was hitting Iran as a preemptive strike because it felt under existential threat from Iran's nuclear facilities and Iran's nuclear bomb. And tensions have continued to escalate. There have been a barrage of missiles going both ways. It's very concerning.
You're an expert in Middle East conflict and also the ongoing situation there. Do you believe Israel had the right information that Iran was building its nuclear capabilities and therefore that was justification for that strike?
Well, all indications suggest that Iran did not have a nuclear bomb, was not in a position to build a nuclear bomb. In fact, since 2015, when they signed a nuclear agreement between Iran and the United States and various international actors, that joint plan of action meant that Iran stopped its nuclear program and any suggestion that it could divert its program towards building a bomb. There was a recent intelligence report to President Trump only 2 weeks ago that said Iran does not have an active weaponization program. There was another report by the International Atomic Agency that said Iran does not have a weaponization program. And there are questions asked about how Iran is conducting its nuclear program. There is a question of some things not being reported properly. So problems persist with Iran's nuclear program, but no one was suggesting that Iran was anywhere close to the nuclear bomb that Israel has claimed. In fact, I think it's important to keep in mind that Bibi Netanyahu has been saying that Iran is close to building a bomb since 2015, in 2012, 2013. Now, he kept saying that Iran is close to building a nuclear bomb. So that's just a very old excuse that Israel is using to really achieve something different, which I think is regime change in Iran.
So do you believe then that why would Israel launch those strikes if there's no justification for the fact that Iran has this nuclear capability to build a nuclear bomb? You're arguing that it's specifically about regime change?
Yes, I think Israel is ultimately aiming for regime change in Iran. Israel has been unhappy and very concerned with the Iranian Islamic Republic because the two regimes have been at loggerheads. And Netanyahu directly himself has had a personal commitment to implementing regime change. He has lobbied the US to be involved, not just now, over the years, decades, previous administrations. Netanyahu has lobbied Obama and also the previous Trump administration to get involved with Iran, cut the head of the snake, and referring to the regime, and implement regime change. So this is the same line of argument and agenda that Netanyahu is not pursuing. Why he is doing it now, I think, is due to the fact that Iran is seriously weakened in the region. Iran had lots of regional allies, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, Hezbollah, Hamas. So all those players are seriously either diminished, disappeared, or weakened. And Israel feels that it's the right time to hit at Iran and basically torpedo any chance of a nuclear deal, because we know US and Iran were talking about some kind of a diplomatic resolution to Iran's nuclear program. And Netanyahu's attack, Israel's attack, has torpedoed basically those talks.
You mentioned the US there. President Trump has come out, Professor, very clearly and said if Iran by any means attacks any US bases or military positions, that they will, quote, face the full force basically of the US military. Do you believe that President Trump will follow through on that threat?
That is the whole irony of the situation. Trump came to office saying he doesn't want to start wars. He's looking for a better deal. But in this case, the US is simply following the Israeli agenda and has left the decision-making to Netanyahu. The US is not setting the agenda in this conflict. The US is simply committing to Israel's defense and following Netanyahu's line. So I think by logical conclusion, you can see how the US would be dragged into this conflict, whether Trump likes it or not. The US would be dragged into the conflict because the US is now providing air support and defense for Israel. That is likely to make US assets in the region targets for either Iran or, more to the point, a lot of various actors in the region that are allied with Iran, various Shia militia groups in the region, especially in Iraq, are allies with Iran and they don't have to wait for an order from Tehran to take action against US assets. They can do it by themselves. Houthis don't need permission from Iran to attack US assets. And if that happens, which it would not be unlikely, when the US would follow through with this threat, yes, I think the US would follow through with that threat. And that is a very, very dangerous turn of events.
On that point, Professor, dangerous turn of events, does that mean if the US is involved in some capacity, because President Trump has certainly threatened that, and you claim that he will follow through, where does that leave Australia and the rest of the world? Do you think this has the potential to be an all-in war?
It has definitely the potential of embroiling everyone in this conflict, because Australia and many other European countries are allied with the United States. As far as Iran is concerned, allied with Israel. So this has the potential to involve everyone in this conflict. And that's why I'm saying it's a very dangerous turn of events, which means that now everyone has a stake in this and everyone has to work towards finding a diplomatic solution to this crisis. We can't let Israel set the agenda and be in the driver's seat. The United States has to be in the driver's seat. The United States is the superpower, and the United States has to exercise its authority and not just follow the Israeli agenda.
So what do you think the US should do? What do you think, in your professional opinion, is the diplomatic solution?
I think the United States needs to ask Israel and tell Israel to stop sending missiles, send the same message to Iran, and threaten both with retaliation. Not just Iran, also Israel need to be threatened with retaliation by the United States if they continue with their aggression. And we have to say aggression here because Israel is the aggressor.
And so if the US doesn't step in and there isn't a diplomatic solution reached quickly, how do you think this ends?
I don't have a crystal ball to see how it ends, but I can see this is a very dangerous trajectory. And I can see that if we continue with this tit-for-tat scenario, it can easily get out of hand. And that would be terrible for everyone in the region and terrible for the United States.
What do you mean by out of hand?
It can get out of hand in a sense that it can turn into an all-out conflict with various U.S. assets in the region being hit. That means countries in the region would be part of the conflict. They can be dragged into it. Even if they don't want to, nobody wants to be dragged into the conflict. But if they are hit, they'll have to do something about it. And that's what I mean. It's going to get out of hand.
We appreciate your analysis, Professor. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's hope a deal is reached, and a peaceful one, very shortly.
I hope so. Thanks for having me.
That was Professor of Middle Eastern Politics at Deakin University, Shahram Akbarzadeh. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.